Sorry for that short break in transmission. So drawing support and resistance is done in this format, okay? So you pick out your high and your lowest point, which is your resistance up here and your support at the base here, okay? So this is our support and this is our resistance up here. Now, having drawn that on 4 hours, you now change to a smaller time frame. I think we already did for daily. Yes, we did for daily. We've done for 4 hours. Now you drop to 1 hour now. And then on 1 hour, you also draw your support and resistance for this time for the time frame as well. I actually have brought in the support and resistance on 1 hour as well. This is for 1 hour and this is the support for 1 hour. Okay. So though we have another support at this point, which is also significant, so you could draw it from there too. And then if you trade on much smaller time frame, you can draw up on 30 minutes as well. So I will switch to 30 minutes and draw a valid support and resistance if there is no existing one. Well, the currently existing support and resistance, especially on the 4 hours, is still very valid. So I would only adjust that a little bit like this. And that's also, I don't think I really need to draw any more support and resistance, but if you still want more details, then you can add one in the middle here. So I will add one in the middle. Let me put it here. So I'll add one in this middle here. This is a very good support as well. And I want to change the color of that. I'll change the color. Oh, sorry about that. I think I removed it instead of changing the color. Okay, so I will change the color of that, edit, and change the color to, let's say, olive here, and done. So now I can see from a glance what my chart is doing and what it would most likely do in the nearest future. So I see how my trades move easily from chart to chart, from support to resistance. You see it moving from this support at the base here all the way to the resistance up there. And you see it move also when it takes off from that resistance. The next target will be the support at the base. So it might pause along the way. You see the pause here. It has paused at this point a little too before it moved on. You see it paused a little at this point before it went back up. It's going to break this and continue down. And at the end of the day, end up somewhere around here because that's where the journey is. In fact, it's even going to go below, further lower than that. Let me switch to her. So you see it went all the way from here to this point, from this point to this point, and it's going to go from this point down to this point at least before it decides whether it's going to continue down like this as well. So this is how you use support and resistance. Now, if you look at this chart closely, you realize that almost everywhere these lines have been drawn, if you go back in the chart, you realize that almost everywhere there's a line, there's a pause in the price action. The market pauses when it gets to that point. It either turns around or it plays at that point a little before it moves on or before it turns around again. So you can see that happening over and over and over again. You see it at this point, 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 you see it here. So I think this is probably the only place where the market just plowed through the line without pausing, and then it did the same thing around here and then went and paused at the 4 hour line. Okay, so 4 hour resistance. But before then, you see the market pausing at every point. That's one pause, that's a pause, that's a pause, that's a pause. Always pausing where you find those support and resistance. No matter how far in time you want to go, you are going to find those support and resistance still valid. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to see the entire chart to draw your support and resistance. You can draw with as much of the chart as you can see, and it still remains valid throughout your chart as well. So now, one thing I want us to pay attention to is that support and resistance lines are not actually a price line. You notice that on each of those lines, at the end of each of those lines on this corner here, you find the price for that resistance. Okay, the price of the currency at that resistance. What I mean is this: at this point, you see that this purple line has a price there, 1.02111. That line is 1.02111 price. You see this light blue has its own.
the olive has its own, the other light blue has its own. All of them have a price attached to them. That is the price of the currency at that resistance. But that does not mean that only that line is the resistance or the support. This is a support, this is a support, this is a support, this is a resistance, this is a resistance, this is a support as well. Okay, but that does not, okay, this is also a valid support. So it doesn't mean, and this is a valid both resistance and support. Now it doesn't mean that at those very points at the point of the support or the resistance, but rather resistance and support are actually zones, not a line. It's a zone. So all of this area from here down across the line, across this way up, are still valid zones. Okay, so if it still falls within that area, that is why I can boldly say that these 2 points are in the same resistance zone. The same thing applies to these. They are still in this same resistance zone. Do we understand that now? So it's a zone. It's not like it's one specific line like this that if it breaks above that line, then it has broken. No, it's still within the zone. Okay, so please take note of that. Resistance and support are not specific price but a zone. So if I'm looking at the larger time frame now, this blue, this light blue, the olive, and this red are in the same zone on this larger time frame. So I will still be and this other blue, all 4 of them are still in the same zone here. But if I'm going to look at them at different zone, then I will be looking at much smaller time frame. Like when I get to 15 minutes now, then they become valid different zones. Okay, because the distance between here, the olive green line, and the light blue line are much wider than on a larger time frame. So I will be looking at this area as a zone. I will be looking at this area as a zone. I'll be looking at this area as a zone. The same zone extends all the way to this point. And I'll be looking at this area as another zone. Well, about here as another zone, because it's also a valid zone. Okay. So on smaller time frame like this, we can see more zones than if we are looking at a bigger time frame. All right. So now we know that support and resistance are zone. And then one other thing I want to add here is that there is no permanent support and permanent resistance. Okay? There is no absolute support or absolute resistance. What that means is what you see as a support at a point might actually be a resistance in the future. In fact, every support, once it's broken, becomes a resistance. And every resistance, once broken, becomes a support. What do I mean by that? Let me do this here. Let me remove these drawings and go back to a larger time frame. Now, look at this. On a larger time frame, when we drew this blue, the top blue line here, the one I highlighted now, when we drew it as a resistance. And then we drew this one as a support. Okay? But if you go back in time to a larger time, a smaller time frame, let me go to 4 hours now, you find that the same line that represents a resistance can also represent a support. What do I mean by that? Look at this line, this blue line here. So let's take a look at this point. Can you see this? This is a resistance. Okay? It's a resistance at that point. It's a resistance at this point too. But it's a support at this point. It's also a support to this movement here. Can we see that? So that is what I mean by a support becoming resistant and a resistance becoming a support. Now, when this resistance, this support here, if it gets broken, it's going to become a resistance. And what happened? It was a support here. It rejected the first time, rejected the second time, and went up, and now finally broke that support. The moment he broke that support and went for the next support, he came back to this and functioned as a resistance at this point. You see, it's rejecting up this point already, which means price is most likely going to continue down to this second support down here. So every support is a potential resistance, and every resistance is a potential support. Every support that is broken
is going to be a resistance in the future. Once a support is broken, once price goes through a support, that support is going to become a resistance in the future. And you can check it out throughout. You see this, price went up. On its way up here, it hits this place as a resistance. Excuse me. It hit this point as a resistance, rejected a little, and finally broke the resistance. After it broke the resistance, it came back to test it again as a support this time around, rejected it, and went up to the previous resistance. And after testing the previous resistance, it came down. What did it do? You see it started playing at that point, or it became a very strong support now, though it was a very strong resistance at this point. Okay, so at this point it was a strong resistance, but at this point it became a very solid support. So it kept pulling and pulling and pulling until it finally broke it and went back up. Okay, so now it came back again, and you see it played around here a little before it broke down and finally broke this place. Now that it has broken here, it rejected it, tested it, rejected it, and started going back up. So every point that it is plowing through right now on this point is going to use them later in the future as as support areas. It plowed through all the resistance. Now from now on, it's going to start using them as support. See the first use here of this blue line as support, and then he used the olive green one as support again. See how we used it as support at all these points, and then he pulled down, finally came down here, used this as support next, broke back to the top one, came back down, and then came back here now using the same support that he used here as resistance in this point. Okay, so support and resistance are very, very important if you are trading forex. Now, if you can successfully mix support and resistance together with trend line, you can get an excellent trading system. Okay, you can get an excellent trading system. What do I mean by that? Let's look at this. We have support and resistance drawn up throughout this entire chart right now. If I bring in a trend line for this corner, let's assume that price was somewhere around here when I came when I saw it, and then I draw a trend line for this trend here. So I'm going to bring in a trend line now, and I draw a trend line from here up like this. Can you see that? The moment that trend line is broken, which is what happened on this candle, this long black candle coming down, once the trend line is broken and the trend broke through both trend line and support, which is this point, and this support and resistance line at the same time, you see that it just retested, and after that, what happened? It fell away immediately. So once a trend is broken, usually results in a deep fall of prices. So that is how to trade support and resistance. Okay, so having said this, I'm going to stop this video here. It's a really long video. I hope you've been patient enough to watch it to the end. In the next video, we are going to focus more on trading now. At least we have a relatively good understanding of support and resistance. And if you have any questions, please feel free to raise them so we can deal with them. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next video.